People can hate the Predator all they want. That's fine. That's their own opinion. But when I said in my review that it could have been a lot worse, this is what I'm referring to. This is Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, which came out in 2007, directed by Greg and Colin Strause, or as they tried to be called, the Brothers Strause. But anyway, this movie picks up right where Alien vs. Predator left off, where an alien-predator hybrid bursts out of the corpse of Scar, the Predator from the last movie. Go check out my review for Alien vs. Predator for my entire spiel on why this thing shouldn't be alive, but I actually do have to give this movie props for going through with this idea. Even though the Pred alien is nothing new, even though it's something that's been already made through the comics, I do appreciate that the final shot in the last movie wasn't just a funny gag, but they actually followed up on this. So anyway, we have this alien-predator hybrid running through the Predator ship, killing off most of the crew until the last surviving Predator accidentally shoots a hole into the ship, forcing it to crash land on Earth, where a ton of facehuggers escape, in addition to the hybrid. But right before the last Predator is killed, it sends out a distress call to the Predator homeworld, and there's one lone Predator, which is nicknamed Wolf, that heads down to Earth to try to clean up the mess and get rid of any evidence of a xenomorph outbreak. And judging by that plot description right there, this actually sounds like a cool idea. I mean, it wouldn't be the formula for an amazing movie, but it would be a little cool idea. A Predator just going through Earth, cleaning up a xenomorph infestation while taking care of an alien-predator hybrid. What could go wrong? Everything went wrong with this movie. Every fucking thing. Throughout my other reviews for the Alien and Predator movies, you have heard me bash this movie to no end. Well, I'm finally here. We're at this movie now, and I will say that not only is this the worst Alien movie by far, not only is it the worst Predator movie as well, but behind Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, this is my least favorite movie ever. Ever. I fucking hate Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, and I'm even more ashamed to admit that when this movie came out, I actually enjoyed it. This movie came out in 2007 when I was 16 years old, just 1 year before I started getting a bigger appreciation for film as an art form and looking at all the little pieces to it. And by this point, I had seen Alien, Aliens, and Predator, and I saw it in the theater with my younger cousins because I think we paid to see The Golden Compass or National Treasure 2, but snuck into this movie because none of us were 17 yet. And walking out, I remember enjoying it, probably because it was rated R, but despite me enjoying this movie back then, deep down there was something in my gut saying, you know this movie's crap. Like, I just felt icky for saying that I enjoyed it. And since then, I just grown to dislike this movie more and more until I had to rewatch it for this review where I fucking despise this movie. Despite the really cool setup and the cool ideas that it presents, what this movie reduces both Alien and Predator to is a Friday the 13th slasher movie. And that probably has to deal with the fact that the movie has half the budget of the last movie. It's so poorly made with so many things that make me furious when watching it. Because you know this, I love Alien, Aliens, and Predator. They are in my top 50 favorite movies of all time. And to see the franchise just de-evolve to this level is insulting amongst many other things throughout the movie. One thing I really hate about this movie is the acting. The acting is one of the worst I've seen in the last decade. Everyone has the exact same monotone tone of voice throughout the entire movie. Nobody has any facial expressions, and the characters range from dull to downright unlikable. Unlike the last movie, where you had a few likable characters, and then most of everyone else was just forgettable. Here, there is no likable character in this movie whatsoever, and at worst, you have some real douchebags here that you just hate, and you go, why are these guys the heroes? Why should we root for these unenthusiastic, boring shitheads? And it especially doesn't help with the poor dialogue. There's a lot of lines in here that made me groan. And there are two in particular that stick out to me as being truly awful. The first one comes from our main character, Dallas. I'll get back to that a little later, where they finally get a full idea of the xenomorph infestation and that there are a bunch of murders happening in the town. And he goes to the sheriff and says, People are dying. We need guns. Even back then when I regrettably enjoyed this movie, it was a dumb line. But watching it in 2018, with everything that's gone on since, with all the mass shootings out there and how the right's answer is, we need more guns, I just went, oh boy, this line has definitely not aged well at all. Even back then when it was a terrible line, it's just gotten worse as time goes on. And then the other line that made me laugh out loud, funny enough, it's also another line that involves politics, is when this out-of-nowhere army colonel tells all the survivors to head to the middle of town. One of the characters thinks that the colonel is lying and saying that there's an evac at the center of town, which would pretty much lead all the xenomorphs to the center of town to kill all the people there. And there's one character that says, "That's crazy, the government doesn't lie to people." And that made me laugh out loud, and maybe a little too loud to where I woke my dog up. These are a bunch of lines that even Arnold Schwarzenegger wouldn't spew out. And speaking of which, they once again quote Arnold in this movie. Our main character says, "Get to the chopper." And guys, I've said this a million times before, nobody should ever quote Arnold Schwarzenegger. Nobody can deliver a one-liner the way Arnold Schwarzenegger does. Maybe Sylvester Stallone, but just stop it. But regardless, I hate all the characters in this movie. They are just downright terrible. And they're played by a bunch of no-name actors. There are a few people that you recognize, like John Ortiz, but he's mostly a side character in a lot of other movies since then. Like, he was in the 4th and 6th Fast and Furious movie. He was in Kong Skull Island. But I haven't seen him in any major roles ever since this movie came out. And then everyone else, I don't think ever had a career after this movie. Like, this is a movie that will ruin a career for you. And what really confuses me about this movie having no recognizable actors at all is that every other Alien and Predator movie that has come out before or even after this movie has had a bunch of A-list or recognizable people. Like, in terms of actors, you had people like Tom Skerritt, Sigourney Weaver, Diaphic Koto, John Hurt, Michael Biehn, Bill Paxton, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Carl Weathers, Jesse Ventura, Danny Glover, Bill Paxton again, Pete Postaway, Ron Perlman, Winona Ryder. And even after this movie came out, you had people like Adrian Brody, Danny Trejo, Lawrence Fishburne, Topher Grace, Mahershala Ali, Noomi Rapace, Charlize Theron, Guy Pearce, Michael Fassbender, Idris Elba, Catherine Waterston, Danny McBride, Keegan-Michael Key, Olivia Munn. And in terms of directors helming these movies, even if the movies were terrible, you had people like Ridley Scott, James Cameron, John McTiernan, David Fincher, Shane Black. You even had Robert Rodriguez as a producer for Predators. He is not an unknown. These are recognizable names. Some of them are A-list directors. It just makes me so confused and angry why this movie has just slummed it so much with both franchises. It's downright unforgivable. Now, there's one thing that this movie does better than the first Alien vs. Predator, and surprisingly, it's not about the R rating. I'll get back to that in a little bit, but one thing that this movie does better than the first Alien vs. Predator is the Predator actually looks better this time around. I had a big issue with the first movie where the Predators were too bulky and the face just looked really fake and unconvincing. Here, the face actually looks pretty damn good, and the body is more slimmed down to what we're familiar with in Predator and Predator 2. And yeah, the Predator looks really good this time around. The only trade-off is that somehow the xenomorphs come across as fake. There are some good animatronics here and there, and the Pred alien at points can be a really cool effect, but there are also a lot of points where the xenomorphs look like they're made of rubber, and sometimes when the xenomorphs turn their heads around, it looks like they're being propped up on a pole, and just some guy doing this over and over, and I don't know why we got this trade-off, but I don't know, you can't really have anything good with this movie. And maybe that might explain the one thing in this movie that everyone complains about, the lighting. This is one of the worst shot films I've ever seen in a long time. It is so dark in a way where it looks like they're only working with one light kit. You could barely see anything that's going on in this movie. In fact, I actually started watching this movie on my computer, but I could not see a thing. So I tried watching it on my TV, and yeah, you could make it out a little better, but even then, it's mostly a lot of shadows. It's mostly a lot of silhouettes clashing into each other. The action scenes are just unappealing to look at. And maybe that explains the bad lighting so they could just hide how fake the xenomorphs look. And especially with the Pred alien. The best look that we even get of the hybrid is through behind the scenes stills. And when you look at the behind the scenes stills and even some of the toys, you ask yourself, what is with this brighter color scheme? It just makes the Pred alien look goofy, considering that all the xenomorphs are a black color scheme. Why is this one a light tan? It just looks goofy, and the dreadlocks, for some reason, don't help. I know it's a hybrid of the Predator, so you gotta have the mandibles and the dreadlocks, but this is the first time that the dreadlocks on an alien creature have actually looked really goofy. When I know that the Pred alien has been in other forms of media beforehand, and even after, the Pred alien in the 2010 video game actually doesn't look too bad, but in this movie, I don't know, there's something about it that just looks goofy. Now let's talk about the R rating. The biggest issue that a lot of people had with the first Alien vs. Predator is that it was PG-13, which is a bit hypocritical from the MPAA, considering that you can't show any humans getting stabbed or spilling a lot of blood, but you can have tons of xenomorph and predator blood all over the place. So with this movie, it goes back to its rated R roots, and we get an R rating, more gore, but that doesn't mean it's better. In fact, this actually results in my breaking point with this movie. Because yeah, there's a lot of bloodshed, there's a little more cursing, in fact the cursing actually sounds very forceful. That's not what I'm offended by. What I'm offended by is one particular element in this movie involving the hybrid and one of its abilities. Let me first say that I had given up on this movie because of the horrible acting, the awful characters, and the poor cinematography. I was just rewatching this movie going, okay, you're already at the point where I'm gonna say don't waste your money, but surely it can't get worse from here. And it did. Say what you want about the over-the-top gore in The Predator. I mean, where you have some guy's torso hanging from a tree and blood spilling on a cloaked predator that's unconscious. Say what you want about all the goofy, over-the-top violence in that movie, but it never goes down the road of an alien-predator hybrid laying eggs into a woman whose water just broke. Several women, I gotta say, where the chestbursters eat their fetus alive and then burst out of the stomach. When I rewatched this moment right here, I was like, okay, you are officially in the burn in hell category, and there's nothing you could do to get out. You've got to do something spectacularly amazing to get out of this rating. And it never does. Like, you were already a shitty movie from the start, but you had to go down the road of where you insult me. So, yeah, burn in hell movie. This movie can go fuck itself. I'm sorry for all the additional cursing, but I absolutely despise this movie. Next to Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, this thing is my least favorite movie of all time. And I'm not done with the review. Oh no, I'm still going. I still have a lot of shit to say. One of the other things that just greatly insults me about this movie, as I mentioned, it turns the xenomorphs and the Predator alien into slasher villains. Which, hey, somebody like Jason Voorhees, that works fine because that's already what those movies are. Garbage. But not Alien and Predator. And as I mentioned over and over and over again, Alien, Aliens, and Predator are some of the greatest science fiction horror movies of all time. When James Rolfe reviewed this movie in Monster Madness 2013, he summed it up perfectly, and I'm going to pretty much borrow and alter what he said. Alien, Aliens, and Predator came out in 1979, 1986, and 1987, respectively, but they feel timeless. They still hold up to this day. Any generation can look at them and enjoy them tremendously, especially Aliens. Aliens vs. Predator Requiem was made in 2007 and is pretty much a time capsule to what was going on in horror movies back then. It's stuck in this era, and it's just a downright insulting movie. Which I guess I should talk about the ending of this movie, and if you guys couldn't tell, I am fighting off a cold, so I'm gonna try to finish this off before the cold gets to me. But the ending revolves around the Colonel lying about the fact that there's an evac in the center of town, just so he can try to have a way to lure all the xenomorphs to the center of town and drop a nuke on the town, killing a bunch of innocent men, women, and children just to kill up all the xenomorphs. And then our main character somehow gets a hold of the Predator weapon, and it's set up for a sequel where the Colonel delivers the Predator weapon to Mrs. Yutani, which we all know from Weyland Yutani, the corporation in Alien and Aliens. And it's trying to be a big origin story to what happens next to lead into the Alien series. And Thank God that never happened, because this movie really was a franchise killer. Like I said, burn in hell movie. You are downright insulting. You're a piece of shit. It's like one of these things where it shouldn't have been made at all. But wait, I'm not done quite yet. One other thing that this movie is extremely guilty of is pretty much ripping off moments from the past movies, and I made an entire list of them on my phone, and I'm gonna read them all off. Every little moment that this movie rips off, I'm gonna point out and show you how unoriginal this movie is. First of all, the title for this movie rips off the title of Aliens, where it has that line and the big light. There's one shot where the xenomorph facehugger in a tank that pretty much smashes against the glass for no reason other than the fact that they did that in Aliens. Like I mentioned, the main character's name is Dallas, which is the name of Tom Skerritt's character in the original Alien, Captain Dallas. When the Predator Wolf arrives on Earth, it is an exact replica of the opening shot from Predator, where the ship heads to Earth and then we see a little pod escape from it. It lands in the water, and then the Predator walks out of the water cloaked. In the first Predator, he was cloaked so Arnold couldn't see him, and we as an audience discovered that this technology doesn't quite work well in water. In this movie, there's no reason for him to be cloaked, other than, hey, remember this from Predator? The next ripoff is something that doesn't seem consistent with the Predator's plan, because the Predator goes to Earth to try to clean up the mess and get rid of any evidence of a xenomorph infestation. Yet he kills a guy for no reason. The guy wasn't a harm to him at all, and he decides to skin him and hang him from a tree. Why? Just because the Predators do that in the first Predator movie and Predator 2. This Predator is supposed to do all this in secret without anybody knowing, so why would he just randomly skin a guy that did nothing to harm him and leave his body hanging in a tree for somebody to discover? So fucking stupid. It rips off the scene in Predator where Arnold injures the Predator and it's shooting his plasma cannons all over the place. In this movie, the wolf Predator gets harmed by a xenomorph, and then he starts doing that to a power plant, taking out power in the entire town. This movie rips off Newt and Ripley from Aliens, where it has a mother and daughter, right down to the point where the mother looks like Sigourney Weaver in a way, and it just does nothing with this relationship at all, just to go, hey, remember the Newt-Ripley relationship from Aliens? And I'm like, yeah, I'd rather be watching Aliens than this turd right here. And then lastly, in the Colonel's control room, the noises that the computer makes are the same noises whenever there's text appearing in the computers in the original Alien. I'm sure there's some other moments that this movie rips off from the past that I'm forgetting, but I'm in just no mood to continue. I hate this movie. I got nothing else besides this and this. Fuck this movie to hell. So there you go. That's my, I guess I should say, rant for Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, and my review for every Alien and Predator movie made. Despite me being sick, I had to record this review, and I hope you enjoyed it. So I want to hear what you guys have to say. I'm curious if there's somebody out there that actually enjoys this movie. I'd be so curious to see if anybody says, Alien vs. Predator, that's kind of cool. Which I'm gonna stay completely silent if you write that down in the comments. But whatever case, if you've seen this movie, let me know what you think. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and of course leave a comment. Don't forget to support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one